Do not press me to leave you or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. This passage is often read at weddings because of its message of love and devotion. However, it's not a passage about a wedding couple. It's a passage about a mother-in-law and her devoted daughter-in-law. If you have ever read this very short book of the Bible, only 4 pages long, you know that Ruth faithfully journeys with her mother-in-law and faithfully follows her advice. If you've never read the story of Ruth, let me tell you that listening to Naomi ends very well for Ruth. Ruth remarries, and despite being a Moabite, a foreigner, and not a Jew, Ruth has a son who becomes the grandfather of King David and the great, 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 etc., grandfather of Jesus the Christ. Ruth is definitely a devoted daughter-in-law, and as Pastor Kenneth Hawk says, Ruth is also a healing person. In his booklets for those journeying through the grieving process, Dr. Hawk writes, healing people are H, here for you when you need them. They're willing to be with you and make time for you. They know that their presence is one of the greatest gifts they can give. Healing people are E, empathetic. No one else can truly understand what you're feeling, but people with empathy will do their best to understand and let some of your pain, touch them. A, accepting. They don't judge you, try to change you, or tell you what you should do or how you should think or feel. Healing people are L, listening. They really focus on what you have to say. They let you share your feelings and know how important it is for you to tell your story again and again. In a perfect world, we would all be healing people. When someone we loved was diagnosed with cancer or a chronic disease, would that we could just sit quietly with them and let them pour out all of their feelings over and over again. For those who are grieving, whether the loss was recent or decades ago, it would be so healing if we could just be with them, not offering any cheery phrases like, time will heal all wounds, or God needed another angel. In a perfect world, we would all be healing people. Here, empathetic, accepting, listening, willing to walk with others through the dark and lonely times, letting some of their pain touch us. That is actually the meaning of the word compassion. Compassion comes from 2 Latin words, pate and cum, meaning to suffer with. Compassion means being willing to suffer with, to sit with those who are grieving, to journey with those who are going through divorce, addiction, crisis, and let some of their pain touch us. As Brene Brown shares though, compassion is not our default response. She writes, I think our first response to pain, ours or someone else's, is to self-protect. We protect ourselves by looking for someone or something to blame. Or sometimes we shield ourselves by turning to judgment or by immediately going into fix-it mode. Over my years of ministry, I have sadly heard over and over again stories of people who are looking for a healing person to sit with them in their grief over the death of a loved one, their grief over the loss of their own health or a loved one's health. People who were looking for some loving kindness and instead were brushed off with platitudes or even ghosted by family and friends who chose to protect themselves from the pain. Offering compassion, being willing to share someone's pain, is not our default response. Compassion is a choice we make. Compassion is a spiritual practice, a daily spiritual practice. Compassion is an act we practice with ourselves so we can practice it with others. As Pema Chodron, a writer and American Tibetan Buddhist, says, compassion is knowing your darkness well enough that you can sit in the dark with others. Compassion is knowing your darkness well enough that you can sit in the dark with others. Again, as Brené Brown writes, that is not our default response, nor is it our usual understanding of compassion. In her talk, Rising Strong as a Spiritual Practice, Brené writes, so many times when we think of compassion is, I see you and you're suffering. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to flip on as many lights as I can flip on. That's not about being compassionate with you, though. That's about my own discomfort of sitting in the dark with you. Compassion is being willing to sit and listen with no judgment or fix-it solutions. Compassion is being willing to share someone's pain, no matter how uncomfortable and scary. Compassion is knowing your darkness well enough that you can sit in the dark with others. Compassion is a spiritual practice, a daily choice we make. Compassion is Ruth hearing Naomi's words, Naomi's bitterness, Naomi's perfectly reasonable explanations for why Ruth and Orpah should walk away and leave her misery and grief. Compassion is Ruth hearing all of that and simply saying to Naomi, do not press me to leave you or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. They are words of love and devotion, and they also words of compassion. They are words in which Ruth says to Naomi, yes, life would be so much easier if I went back to my parents' home and started over, pretending like we had not both suffered loss. Yes, life would be so much easier if I walked away from you and your sorrow and pain. Yes, life would be so much easier if I did not take this journey with you into the unknown. However, I choose you. I choose to sit in the darkness with you. I choose to walk in the darkness with you. Where you go, I will go. Where you live, I will live. Your people shall be my people, and your God shall be my God. Ruth is what compassion looks like. You are what compassion looks like. Whenever we are willing to breathe through our fears and wrestle with our discomfort and sit in the darkness with someone else's grief and pain, whenever we are willing to embody God's presence with our presence, offering support and loving kindness to someone in need, that is when we fulfill Jesus' words to love God and to love our neighbors. That is when we live out the Christian calling to love one another because love is from God. That is when we most closely follow Jesus, who showed us through the cross his willingness to suffer with and because of us. Compassion and loving kindness, being willing to sit in the dark and embody God's love. This is how we live the way of Jesus Christ, building God's kingdom and healing the world.